Culturally, you're going to have leaders, and that's important in a lot of different ways. But if the leader doesn't walk and talk this culture and mindset, you will not have it permeate throughout your organization.
Hey, it's Nikki Llewellyn Gregory, and you're on Gut Plus Science. You're in for a fast-paced, storytelling, action item-rich leadership growth experience. I hope you make this podcast a habit. I consider it a leadership mentoring tool. Learning together makes us better together, and that is how we change the world around us. Let's get to it. Hey, it's Nikki, and Dr. Kevin Berkopes is with me today to mentor us on how to build a learning organization. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Imagine if every person on a team was fired up and engaged in their learning and development. I mean, that's how you make some game-changing results happen among individuals and business outcomes. Kevin is the CEO of the Math Track Institute, a math-specific training, degree, and licensure pathway that prepares people to learn and teach mathematics. Among many other roles, Kevin is always advancing the knowledge of people. That is his core, and empowering them to build a robust life for them, their families, and those that they get to serve right behind all of that knowledge advancement. So, Kevin, really excited that you're here today to mentor us on how to build a learning organization. I think every leader wants that. You've seen the power and the value of workplaces that have learning as core to their culture. I want to start with, tell us what a learning organization means to you.
Yeah, I think the general idea is that from my work, human beings have been pretty well situated as one of the most learning beings, right, in our planet and otherwise. We're driven by learning. We lust for innovation, among other things. We want to change. We want to do things differently, better. Sometimes we find ourselves attracted to environments that are providing us with that, or at least the gap between what is satisfaction and not is that there isn't that provided for them. I benefit from working in an industry that is naturally inspirational. I hear this all the time, seeing the light bulb go on for a young person. It's an intoxicant to a certain extent. It is something that drives people for decades to provide. It's a service oriented, it's inspirational, it's among other things. And a lot of people that are in education find inspiration in that way and then continue to learn because they want to be better at that. Other industries, people and CEOs that I'm networked with maybe don't have the benefit of that type, right? A completely service oriented industry. But there are other ways to inspire, and learning is one of the core aspects of that. And there are pretty well defined ways of setting your organization with one, recognizing that human beings are this way, and two, incentivizing them in various ways because we're not all the same and we all want different things. And being able to build an organization that allows those diverse skill sets and drives and capabilities to come to the forefront towards driving value, there's actually a pretty well-defined way to do that. And a learning organization built around those ideas, in my opinion, is something that isn't talked about enough, but is likely one of the key correlates or proxies for success.
I love that you shared that like light bulb moment visual. So we learn, light bulb moment goes off. It's this learning yields inspiration, And so how do we propel more light bulb moments, not just like boring learning, right? Like it's challenging learning so that the light bulb goes off, and then this inspiration and the energy, it's like people want to drive engagement, energy, inspiration, right? Yielding from that knowledge. I really love that. Before we keep going, I'm curious, as we just like lay foundation here, what is the mindset shift or the mindset we should take? Some people may just not think about this as a leader when you think knowledge as core and learning as core. What maybe, or would you like to challenge them with, like, here's the way that maybe to take the angle of your mindset first?
I think there's a couple of different things to think about when it comes to this that maybe aren't talked about. One is that transparency and its balance between transparency and full information, telling all of your employees that you're 5 days away from missing payroll might not be the best way of being transparent. But transparency and mission, where the company is at and where you are at. If you think about the inspirational light bulb moment, it's oftentimes that you have a why question that finally gets satisfied. And that feels so good to people in my context in math and learning. There's always like, why do we need to know this thing? Or why is it that you can't do this? And a sort of a very simple trite example is people are like, well, why can't you divide by zero? And when you explain to them that division is repeated subtraction. And how many times can you subtract zero before you run out of stuff? People are like, oh, gosh, that feels good. Can you tell me more about all of these other whys that I have? And adults have that too. They have whys about what they do at an organization day to day that are somewhat process oriented or somewhat, mandated that they have to. And explaining in a transparent way what those things are takes time, but it's worth the effort because of the same light bulb type of experience that you can capitalize on. The other thing I think is that constraints are useful. That's hard for people to understand. So if you think about it in the complexity way, you have constraints that are enabling and constraints that are limiting. Limiting constraints put guardrails and otherwise sort of like inhibitors. Another way of thinking about a guardrail is that you have complete and infinite ability to navigate inside of those guardrails once those constraints are in place. And that is incredibly powerful for a learning organization that not a lot of people talk about is you can't just have a free for all. You can't just have a, without constraint necessarily conversation, because if you don't put limiters on it, then innovation doesn't actually have its ability or worthwhile ability to be sparked.
Going back to, the foundation, I remember that you had shared with me, I had a note that you said, people want to learn. And I'm just, wanting to hit this on the head that sometimes there are leaders out there that they're like, oh, do they really want any more training? The belief that people do want to learn. I remember jotting that down from you. And so I just think that that's really important to note as well, just laying that foundation. As a leader, knowledge is so powerful and sparks engagement, and people want to learn. And so adopting that. The other that I really want to dive deeper on, innovation. So innovation is foundational to all of what you're doing. And I find that many have trouble innovating. And it's a more popular thing that businesses and leaders are like, we need to do this. Walk us through how you lead people to innovate.
I think there's a bit of an error in my code that I've always carried is there's got to be a better way to do this. Always, there's got to be a better way to think. I need to question whether or not my first assumption on these matters is validated. And I tell my team a lot of times that, new and old, I've worked with a lot of my teammates for a decade plus, and they've sort of understood this about me is I question everything that I believe constantly, because without kind of self-reflecting and understanding that your core value sort of things that you think you hold irrefutable, man, those are pretty big anchors for you to be innovative. I understand safety, and sometimes that's where we put ourselves when we don't want to question everything, right? Constantly, again and again. I just don't operate that way. If somebody says something that makes me question something that maybe was a core belief or thought or process that was in place, and I don't allow myself or my organization to question it, gosh, you're setting yourself back in terms of innovation. The idea of innovation and the implementation are very fundamentally different. Yes, we want to innovate because we have to do new and we have to fight competition and otherwise compete and stay up in the markets or be valuable or relevant. But that means that you have to question whether or not, future forwards having a digital camera is going to be useful when you have smartphones, right? And a lot of organizations don't realize the obsolescence of what they do until it's too late. And I think if you constantly are questioning sort of the core values of what you do, then you're going to be able to reflect in a way that pushes what the real meaning of innovation is, which is sometimes you need to have a conversation of, well, I'll give you an example. So we have understood in the education space that communicating with schools directly with what we offer is pretty important. And to do that at scale, we use calling or we use email and other types of things. And so sometimes you should put into your team a restraint or a constraint where you remove one of your core capacity operating. So an example would be I went to my team and I said, you can't use email anymore. What are we going to do? And from that, the first was like, what do you mean? Email's always going to be. And I'm like, nope, no one's allowed to say that. What you're allowed to say is we're not going to use email anymore. So you better come up with some really great ideas of how we're going to continue to do things future forward. Divergence thinking is the idea that nobody's allowed to say no to an idea. That is really positive. People want to give really crazy ideas like, why don't we flavor ice cream like bubble gum. And somebody's like, well, I don't know if that would really work. That's convergence. Divergence is that you come up with a whole bunch of ideas within a constraint that you have maybe strategically provided to your team to see what would come of it. Convergence from there is where you converge on an idea of what you can do now, next, or never. But don't go there first.
So, when you were sharing that, innovation from a concept versus implementation. So I'm a leader that's listening and I'm just thinking about like some of the questions that might be coming up and I'm thinking about my own questions. From a concept, innovation, it's a must. I mean, if we are going to be in a thriving workplace and building something for the future, innovation is a must. So that's like from a core function. Now, how we implement it, something that I think that you're challenging us on right now is there's a better way to help all people grasp innovation. If everyone was presented with a challenge like, no more email, we're never using email again, what would you do? And everyone gives an opportunity to share a solution. And like you said, we don't say no to any idea. All ideas can come on the table. I'm trying to articulate what that is, but it is a simple way that it gets everyone involved to be able to throw that out versus like the 7 out of 1,000 that are wired for innovation.
People in the work that I do, people have often said they're either mathematical or they're not. And culturally, we've had this dialogue since our third grade math teacher told us we weren't good at something and we believed it the rest of our adult lives. That's a belief. That's not real. Beliefs have reality to them, but they are also mixed with a bunch of other things, which is there's falsehoods, there's cultural approaches to it, there's a lack of understanding of the full nature of what you are and what you're capable of. I think innovation is exactly the same. That somebody would look at me and go, I'm a language person. I'm not a math person. And I'll be like, well, did you know that math is a language? Because it is. Every way that you would define language, I could easily define mathematics for you in that same way. To claim that you're one instead of the other is a choice, not a reality. And to claim that you're innovative or not is also a choice. Everybody can be innovative in different ways. You're not going to have individuals that are or aren't. You're going to have spectrums. Human beings exist on spectrums. Giving them the ability to produce and provide value in an innovative structure on a spectrum is very important to a learning organization. But it's also very important just to recognize saying that you have a committee of 7 that does everything innovative is nuts. That's isolating a group of people that now have these sort of cultural wraparounds that they're mathematical and everybody else is language based. Like they're the same. You just have to understand a spectrum, which means you have to provide the environment that those things can drive value for you or your organization or the individual. You can't look at somebody and me say, Nikki, you're going to have to solve this problem. You're it. You're the innovative one. Good luck. And we're going to love what you come up with because you're wired this way. The reality is that we would be able to put an environment where lots of ideas can come to the forefront based on the spectrum of innovation. Some of them are going to be those outlier crazy ideas that catch. Some of them are going to be just a half a standard deviation above the mean, and that is incredibly innovative, but maybe wouldn't have made the committee of 7, which means you're missing out on innovation if you don't think about it in terms of spectrums.
I love that you said that. It reminds me of the Gallup Clifton Strengths. So we use that on my team. So for those that aren't familiar, it's a tool that's been around for a long time. It used to be called Clifton Strengths Finder, I think. There's 34 strengths that have been identified through this research. We all have all 34. The report is just given to us and here are our top 5. They're ranked on a spectrum of where we have the heaviest, opportunity to lean into the highest ones. That's another mindset shift that it's not a all or nothing thing. It's not like you are innovative and you're not. And so how do we, if we can help like address those workplaces that are very challenged on this, like what are the first steps? Like how do we help to like start climbing the staircase from we've never really done this, but we really want to invite all to be part of being this learning environment. Talk about like kind of walking up that staircase past the being transparent, having the mindset that, we must innovate. What's next? How do we build from there?
Yeah, I think it might start in a place that not a lot of people understand, but it's incredibly pragmatic. If you want to understand what the problems are that you're trying to solve within your organization, it might be the first place to involve a spectrum, a group of your teammates, and a strategy about what is it that is preventing us from reaching these types of business goals. And you might find that what comes out of that is very different than what your gut's telling you as a leader. You may have a specific thing that you think we have to fix this and X, Y, and Z. Underlying in an idea of complexity is typically what you see as the surface level outcome as being caused by the real problem. And that could be something smaller, nuanced, or underneath that you probably don't have your finger or pulse on as a leader because of the way and how your job and your day to day looks. So involving a group of people to understand the problems to be solved within your organization is the first step, in my opinion, to building a learning organization, because then you value their opinion, their thoughts, and you also put structure around what that value looks like. It's not a spectrum, well, it is a spectrum conversation, right? We're going to have a divergence conversation here, trying to understand what the key problems are to us reaching these business goals. In our case, it was we want to solve the math teacher problem in the US. We want to have a solution that actually solves that problem, which is incredibly complex and been worked on for centuries. And so as we were having the conversation, well, the problem is we don't have enough people. And then some of my teammates are like, well, we do have enough people. And I'm like, tell me more. Or the people that are running these, as I contribute in the same way as an equal in these environments. I'm the CEO and have all these degrees and people call me doctor, but I'm Kevin at that table having a conversation with a bunch of people that are equal in terms of what you can bring to the table for ideas. So what came to that was your original proposition that there aren't enough people choosing teaching is wrong. There are plenty of people choosing teaching. And in fact, schools are hiring them reluctantly, because what's the real problem is that they're not trained and don't have a frictionless pathway to getting educated, which is why we do what we do. After we uncovered that, realized that there's hundreds of thousands of people working in schools full time right now. We don't have a talent problem in terms of who's going to choose to teach. We have a problem of how do we get them credentialed and to an expert level quickly, efficiently, and cost effectively. From there, you can redesign the entirety of what you do as long as you believe and understand that what your team is telling you is the actual problem. How do you validate that? Go talk to your clients. Once you've uncovered something incredibly interesting, go talk and ask. And so we had hundreds of conversations with people that were working in schools who fit these sort of criteria, and they validated time and time again. Yeah, I've been doing this job for 10 years, but I'm making $12 an hour, not 45,000. I don't have health benefits, everything else. Well, why? Well, I don't have a bachelor's degree. Well, couldn't you get one from a university? Yeah, they want me to come on Wednesdays and Sundays. And I have 3 kids and a husband and a house and a mortgage and a car that sort of works. And how am I going to fit all of that into that and pay $80,000 for a job that will start me at 40? And I'm like, okay, we have a real problem that could actually be solved. And then now you've got to go back and actually solve it once you've uncovered what it is. The first start is to understand what the real problem is that you're trying to solve. That's an incredibly innovative mindset. Most people think they know what the problem is that their company is solving. They're probably wrong.
And I think that that is a really solid takeaway right there, that we jump in to solve problems that really aren't the priority problems because we like had a gut feeling about it, right? And so the importance of engaging, you had talked about engaging various team members to work in a united way together to go figure this out and then go validate it with the clients or those that you serve to ensure that that is the problem at hand. And then I'm seeing where you were just giving examples and I was like, "Oh, that's where the eliminating constraints comes in." Where you were just sharing the example of, well, I don't have childcare on this date. And so therefore I can't. Okay. And so next step is once we've identified the problem, let's look at what are the blockers right now and starting to remove those blockers. Am I following?
That's absolutely right. Once you understand the problem, you have your foundational guardrails, right? And then within that, there's impediments to success and flow. I think about things in terms of complexity and flow and movement and evolution. So if you understand that nothing is permanent and there's a flow to this, there's a flow to people as they work day to day in this environment that's complex, that has these impediments that they have to flow around like a rock in a river. Okay, well, how do I remove those impediments? And can I? And the original assumption has to be that all impediments can be removed. And if you can think in that way, that's divergent. That's a divergent conversation. Let me give you an example. We need to be able to give college credit for the work that you're doing, the work that you bring to the table. How would we do that? And, you start to have that sort of conversation with your team and you come up with, what if we had a rubric that we could point to that was nationally recognized for viable work? And then the idea is, well, that's an apprenticeship. Oh, okay. Well, how do you get a registered apprenticeship? Well, the Department of Labor has a rubric that all states recognize as viable work. Okay. Well, can we get college credit for that? Mm, Probably not. And then turns out you can, because there are lots of acceptable ways and processes involved with, internships and co-ops and things that have been accepted for 50, 70 years, where you get a faculty person that says, yeah, that's work. And then Lockheed Martin is employing this person over time and you get 9 credits, 12 credits. Well, student teaching is 15 credits. And that's you not getting paid to go do sort of viable work for a school for 12 to 15 weeks or a semester. You build all of those things in and then you look for precedents for. And in our environments, there's ways of thinking about that rock in a river to be removed for flow. Is likely there's things out there that will give you that ability. It's just, how do you match what's precedent and what's there with what you need and then find a way to make it happen. Sometimes you get to a place where it's like, yep, that one we're going to leave, because that one's the effort to get there is not viable. And then constantly revisiting whether or not that assumption was true. I didn't originally start out to think that I was going to start my own university to be able to do these things, because my original assumption was, that's probably a rock I don't want to move, because I've heard it's really big. I heard it's hard. I heard it takes forever. I heard it's this. I heard it's that. But as we came back and back again and again to the assumptions of what needed to be removed for these people that we were passionate about helping and supporting, turns out that rock was movable. And you have to constantly think back of your assumptions in a loop, in a cycle. And that's also part of innovation, is that what you thought was for sure, like I talked about at the very beginning, in business, you have to come back and revisit, because if you're not understanding the complexity of the environment that you're working in.
Walking in the doors, let's say that this is a physical brick and mortar workplace, okay? And walking into the doors of this workplace that practices inspiration, innovation. They are regularly looking for, like, what are the blockers here, and eliminating constraints, and they have a mix of convergent and divergent thinking, right? All of these things that we're talking about today. As an observer, how would you summarize the uniqueness of that workplace versus your typical, and what you experience in that space with those people? Because I just want to throw out here, pretty sure that this is a lot more rare than popular, right? That this is how workplaces operate. But all people that are listening to the show are working to advance the engagement of people at work. And so just maybe bring that to life, because you're around this a lot more than us, the outcome and like what we could expect if we were hanging in this space. What is that like?
So we're hybrids. We have as we've figured things out over the last 3 to 4 years, like many others, we've realized that a couple of days in office are vital. And then how to spend those times in the office. We have a relatively small team, so we're around 20, which means that we can cater lunch or whatever. And that's important. That's a collegial sort of like, hey, on Thursdays, we're going to have food and everything else for everyone. But we schedule things. When we're together, we schedule a divergence conversation and we think about the problems to be solved, what we're trying to do, what we're trying to build, which is a hard and complex problem to solve, be it that we're in education and dealing with people and everything else, right? And the complexity behind that. But it's actually thoughtfully scheduled and it's time well spent, where you have the entirety of the team in most ways that are built around the idea of having a conversation. And then we set those scheduled events very strategically. One is that we want to solve the problem that we're going to talk about, right? Or figure out what the actual problem is that we're going to talk about. But it's also to build this innovation mindset without and permeating without the organization throughout. If you don't constantly reaffirm that this is valuable and feels good and that everybody gets to have these sorts of things and say and role, then you're never going to build it, because you can't build a culture that you just talk about once and then think that it's going to happen, right? Culture goes over time. inevitably by the nature of constant sort of work and attention and thoughtfulness towards. And so part of our strategy is that when you come into our office, at least as I've heard from people, which I've always thought was very kind, was that when you walk in, you feel energized almost immediately because people are trying to do cool stuff and they're talking and they're smiling and they're happy and otherwise we have hard conversations. Not everybody's happy all the time. And I know I frustrate my teammates by saying things like, yeah, I know we figured that out, but let's go and do this. And they're like, how about we do that? That's fine. We also have an understanding that this culture over time has made everyone better, myself included. I'm a better person. I'm a better dad. I'm a better leader because I'm constantly trying to work through this culture of collaboration and streamlining the idea of an innovative mindset. If you don't have that mindset at the top, because culturally you're going to have leaders, and that's important in a lot of different ways. But if the leader doesn't walk and talk this culture and mindset, you will not have it permeate throughout your organization. It could become like a mission statement that you put up on your wall that everybody's like, "That's cool. That ain't happening here." And really, that starts with the leader and being able to put in place both your understanding of your own evolution, your own drive to be great at what you're doing, and the ego that requires to do those things, balanced with the ego that requires to understand that you don't know enough yet and others know more than you, and that's okay. And if you can acknowledge that in yourself and others, then others are likely to do that in your organization too. You can't do as I say, not as I do in this environment. It just doesn't work and will never probably work, in my opinion.
I love that you walked us through your workplace as the example, and it goes right in alignment with saying, "Hey, this is really a mentoring episode, and you're modeling the way. You are walking us through your workplace. This is the way you are operating." And so, also, that is not a. I wouldn't say that that's the majority. It's like, a company that provides cleaning services, right? And you go into their office and it's like, this place really isn't that clean, but they clean everybody else's, right? It's just that's more the norm. And so it's really cool that I said, hey, just like take us inside this, like, theoretical workplace and like, what would that be? What's the difference there and all this? But you walked us through your workplace. And I just think that that's cool. So I'm appreciative of your time today. I will be very vulnerable. You are extremely intelligent. You can just tell. And I'm like, I'm trying to keep up here. I don't have this problem that often, but I'm like, I got to figure out some insightful questions so I can like keep at this level. Like, I hope all of our listeners got that. And it might be like, hey, Kevin, we need to have you back because I'm just now digesting what you said the first 3 minutes. So this was so good. Really challenging people to build workplaces where light bulbs are going off and collaboration is happening and we're removing blockers and just, I want to say it like lightly, it's not rocket science, super brilliant and smart. It is us really boiling this down to looking at the problems in front of us. Like innovation doesn't have to be 7 people out of 1,000, which is usually the small committee. All of us have the opportunity to see from our perspective, our lens, where are these problems, and then be able to bring ideas to the table to collaborate and figure out how to solve. I think we make it much bigger and overwhelming than it is. And so thank you for breaking this down and inspiring us today. It's been great. And we have 4 questions for you. One of the things we do is we recommend books on every single episode. So you get the opportunity to throw out a book that goes on our recommended reading list. Favorite book of all time or favorite recent read?
I have a strange approach to what I read. And some of it is that I believe you can't do anything innovative future forward without understanding history. And so I spend a lot of time trying to understand history. And one of the most recent books I read was the biography of Ben Franklin. I believe in reading a ton of history, understanding the Phoenicians and the Egyptians and how the Babylonians were integral in all of these things. We talk about the Romans and how did that work. These things are all important to understand if you want to understand how to do what's in the present, because we're not here by mistake, in my opinion. The other thing is, I love this book. I think anybody that wants to read it should. It's a book called A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson. It's about the Appalachian Trail and him walking it and talking about it and all the comedic journey along the way. But it really situates a lot about how funny life is when we take ourselves a little too seriously.
So I was going to say this earlier and then I held off, but now that you said these 2 book recommendations, I'm like, "Can I be like your intern for the day? I just want to follow you around and like see what you do." I'm like, it's basically following like Google around or something, like as a human being. There's just it's wow, the intelligence and just how you think is really fascinating. And I really truly have not told other guests that I want to be their intern. Like this is the first time ever on an episode. So I don't know, other listeners, if you're with me, but email me on that one if you are, because this is just so fascinating. Okay. So math is your jam. What else do you do like as a hobby or skill that you love? But most people don't know that you do that.
You may not know that I'm probably just as proud or have as much value in my own personal life with the arts, painting, sketching, music. I find that if we put things in categories and we forget that these things are overlapping, that sometimes meeting me maybe brings people into sort of an interaction with that. And so if you know that I love to paint and that I build furniture and I love woodworking and other things, as much of a value as using my hands because of the idea that you can imagine and create and then have a finished product that's sitting in front of you and sip really good tea out of a cup you built.
Okay. How do you recharge? Because you're doing a lot in your like headspace and learning and constantly developing people and all of these things. Like, what do you do to just fill your cup?
I'm lucky where my work fills me up and makes me recharged and inspired and the people that I'm around. On top of that, I have very simple goals. I have 3 children who I want to be the most thoughtful dad that I can be, and I'm recharged by that. Being grounded in a certain way of understanding what's important is recharging to me. If you can, despite all the things you're trying to do, still find beauty in something as simple as the sunrise, then I think you're onto something. So those are the things I do. I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe in work and life are intricately intertwined and therefore should be thoughtfully attuned towards the goals that you want to do in your life.
Final question. What is the best way for people to connect with you after this today?
Yeah, I think the easiest way is LinkedIn, Twitter, and then other types of social media. So that's a really easy way. Email is approachable. The website for Math Track Institute is easy to find as well. But I really am starting to think deeply about the engagement that happens through LinkedIn and other types of social media. So connect on there. Let's have conversations. Hopefully, we get a chance to learn from each other.
Ooh, well, Kevin had me on my toes for this episode today. So much challenged learning in this conversation. Oh, he just really illustrated in this conversation how this looks when you're, challenged to think in another way and going deeper in conversation. Oh, so good. And here's my truth you can act on around building a learning organization. Number one, your people want to learn things that make the light bulb go off. Learning yields inspiration. Be an inspirational leader by prompting innovative thinking. Number two, innovation is a must. We must innovate, and all people can innovate, not limited to a few people on the team that are innovators. We all can innovate. We can help people innovate by challenging them, by throwing out the problems that the team is coming up with and getting all people to voice their ideas in that. And it leads right into number three. No one can say no to an idea. An idea is an idea. We embrace them all, throw them all out. Number four, engage various team members to understand what the problems are. So, identifying the problems are really important. And those that are working next to things closely, they're the best to identify the problem. So, across all the departments, let's have people voice what the problems are. The first step in taking action is having identification of the problem. Number five, eliminate constraints. Believe all constraints can be removed. So let's figure out anything that is holding us back from being able to solve this problem and figure out how we get rid of that. So good. Thanks, Kevin. Look forward to having you back. We'll see y'all next time. We just left the world a little bit better. Now, go do something with it.